You want to make some picks on your favorite sports? Check out Underdog's Fantasy Pick'em game, where you can pick higher or lower on between 2 to 8 players and can win up to 325 times your entry by using code Niners when you sign up. And you'll get $1,000 bonus cash and a free pick.
From the alley-oops at Kezar to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. Glad you could join me for what should be a very fun episode. Because John Lynch, of course, at the Combine was talking to media, and he was talking to Matt Maiocco, and Matt Maiocco was asking him, hey, John, when you're looking at pick 11, what does that player need to possess to be a player that you're interested at 11? And John Lynch said they need to be a game changer. Now, that could pretty much be almost any position that's non-kicker, non-punter. I guess kickers could really potentially do that as well. But you're starting to think about playmakers. That's the first thing that went into my mind. And I think all the conversation right now from 49ers fans, from 49ers media, when you look at content creators and podcasters or whoever's talking 49ers, most are looking at key positions along the fronts, defensive line, offensive line. And every 49er fan that watches games wants to see a better defensive line, and they want to see a better offensive line. So when you look at trends that the 49ers have went down in the past, they usually spend high draft picks in the trenches, usually defensive line. Now, they have used a high pick, Mike McGlinchey, for instance, in the top 10, and we know how that worked out. He played well, especially when run blocking, pass blocking was a little bit inconsistent, to say the least. But he's no longer here. And really, the 49ers have primarily went defensive line, right? You've got Nick Bosa in 2019. He was number 2 overall. Solomon Thomas, he was number 3 overall in 2017. Javon Kinlaw, number 14 overall in the 2020 NFL draft. So 49ers have definitely paid a price for defensive linemen. And so mocking defensive linemen or thinking the 49ers are going to take defensive linemen, it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of really good players that are in that category in the first round. And we've been talking about some of the best players, amongst college football's best to play edge or to potentially play defensive tackle. And I think that conversation is valid because I do think that's the most likely. But what if the 49ers look at it as another direction? Because they're meeting with players right now at the Combine. And some of those players are first round talent and guys who are going to go in the first round that are at other key positions, not in the trenches. And so it makes you think they're doing their due diligence. This isn't set in stone that it's going to be an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman. In fact, they haven't really been meeting with too many offensive linemen. I think the numbers are going to go up a little bit. They'll meet with some. I really do think John Lynch and the staff are doing their best to make sure they, basically turn every single rock and make sure they don't miss anything when it comes to the draft. They've been trying to hit. But if you look at recent history, the 49ers are not afraid to take a shot at a skilled player, to go a different direction, to change some of their drafting norms. It was just, a few years back where Aaron Banks, a interior offensive lineman, went in the second round, 43 overall. 49ers don't normally draft a interior offensive lineman that high. They'll draft offensive tackles that they could potentially move in, but not a straight interior offensive lineman. That was a trend breaker. Then last year they took Renardo Green at the end of the second round. That was a trend breaker. They are willing right now to do things that aren't to the norm. And so I don't think we can rule out any possibility for the 49ers. Ricky Pearsall was a first-round pick last year. They drafted Brandon Ayuk in the first round. Wide receiver could make sense. Could another position make sense? Could they go cornerback? Could they go tight end? They've went other positions before. So to me, I think this is an interesting conversation to have, kind of shine some light on potential players that right now seem out of the box, but could make sense. And some of them are going and they're showing out at the combine, and they're letting everyone know how physically gifted they are. But really, when you look at it, a lot of these guys have been putting the tape up for a long time. In fact, some of the guys I'm going to talk about, you've probably heard about them on this channel because I've been talking about these guys make 49er fits and they make a lot of sense. And then now these guys are just performing at the combine and kind of cementing the fact that they could be those guys. So we're going to run down some players that could be an out of the box selection for the 49ers at pick 11. Yeah, it's easy to talk about the offensive linemen. It's easy to talk about the defensive linemen, the edge rushers, potentially at 11. But let's take a deeper look. Let's evaluate. Let's leave no stone unturned. Let's see if we can find somebody maybe the 49ers would be interested in at 11. That's not the norm, and it's a little bit out of the box. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network. Please give it a 5-star rating. If you are going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion. With a large selection of odds and everything from NBA and college basketball to NHL and UFC, Bet Online continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, Bet Online has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. Bet Online, the game starts here. So, how out of the box am I going to get? Well, I didn't want to start so crazy that it caught everyone off guard. But what I did is I went ahead and started looking at some of the other mock drafts that are being done by national pundits to kind of build a little bit of a basis for my conversation. Because if you got guys who are big time and are doing this for a living, a lot of times they have their ears to the ground and they're hearing some of the conversation. It doesn't mean it's going to ultimately be the pick. It doesn't mean that they have their pulse of what the 49ers are going to do. But I think it starts giving you an idea of kind of where players are going to go and their evaluation. And it could mean that maybe a team really does like that player. So that's where I got my basis. And it started with Mel Kiper's Mock Draft 2.0, where he took cornerback Will Johnson out of Michigan. And, Will Johnson is really a good football player. I mean, he's really fantastic. The guy's got a lot of ability. You're talking smooth in and out of his drop. He's able to drive on guys. He can play, in all different. He can play man coverage. He can play press. He could stick with you. This guy is a guy that can pretty much do it all. Bail technique. He's capable of playing in the cover 3, the cover 4. He's capable of playing man coverage, press coverage. He's a do-it-all corner. And I think that a lot of people like this pick. I think that it's a potential pick that would make sense. You're probably losing Charvarius Ward and getting a corner that's big time that could step in day one saves you a little bit of money. Because even drafting a corner in the first round, number one, you would have him contractually for 5 years. So you could play Deommodore Lenoir, you could play Renardo Green, and you could play Will Johnson together for the next at least 3 seasons before you have to make a decision on Renardo Green. That's a pretty nice young core group of secondary players that you can play. And remember, this isn't the old NFL where the third cornerback wasn't on the field that much. This is a NFL in which actually the sub package has become the main defense because you run nickel package 70 to 75% of the time. It's become the base package in the NFL with all these teams going to 3 wide receivers and spreading teams out to find advantages in the run game and in the passing game. So it could become a point of emphasis to make sure you have a good corner who's cheaper. I mean, imagine that. You just paid Deommodore Lenoir. You could go out on the open market. There's going to be some guys, Asante Samuel, you could pay him double digits. You could potentially, go get Paulson Adebo, who I really like, Paulson Adebo. You could go get him, pay him double digits. Or you could sit back. You could draft Will Johnson, a really good cornerback, and you potentially have your cornerback for the next 5 years for about $5 million per season. That is extremely more affordable than going the other route. Now, you do have the risk of him translating to the game, him being able to develop, right? The other guys are proven commodities. Those guys who have been doing it in the league already, you know what you're going to get out of them. So that's one of the advantages of free agency is proven commodity versus potential upside. And so there are some risks with going that direction, but Will Johnson is a very good player. And I want to go to my breakdown of him. But you're talking about a guy that's close to 6'2, close to 200 pounds, runs a 4.3 40, tremendously athletic, and has all the speed in the world. Only 22 years old, or will be 22 years old really shortly. Phenomenal athlete and phenomenal player. I think that he's got the ability to play in the 49ers defense with his man press abilities, his zone abilities. He's good in coverage. I think the one area where I'm probably not as all in on Will Johnson has got to be the physicality when it comes to stopping the run game, being that boundary, force corner, coming up and physically stopping the run consistently against big NFL running backs, or even tackling, guys like DK Metcalf and some of the bigger wide receivers on screens. Those are the types of things that make me a little bit nervous about him. But I mean, the guy has just got the size and the fluidity. You don't normally see guys with this type of length be able to, work in tight spaces and be able to drive on footballs as quickly and consistently. Normally, you find guys like this are usually 5'9", 5'10". They're usually a little bit more fluid with their hips, and he's got massive fluidity in his hips. His back pedal is phenomenal. He stays in it. He stays in phase with wide receivers. And so he's able to definitely stay with guys. He's a definite anticipator. You see him jump routes so many times and get interceptions. He's got a lot of talent. He uses his length to disrupt. I don't want to do a full breakdown. I just want to kind of give you guys an idea. I'll do a full breakdown at another time, but phenomenal player. He can definitely do the things you need him to do and play quarterback. But this would be a difference, a change from what the 49ers normally do. I talked about it. It was, until last year with Renardo Green, the number one corner that they had taken was, they took a couple of guys, third round pick. They took Ahkello Witherspoon. That was way back in 2017, and then a couple years ago, they took Ambry Thomas. That was the draft that we all know they wanted Paulson Adebo. That's when John Lynch screwed up. They had to trade up to get Ambry Thomas. It didn't work out. But Will Johnson in the first round would be a change of philosophy for the 49ers. He's also coming off a year where he was dealing with an ankle. He was dealing with turf toe, lots of things. So they have to feel comfortable with that. But getting a lockdown corner at that price could be advantageous for a team that John Lynch says is trying to get cheaper and trying to get younger at key positions. And the secondary is definitely one of those. Now you'd be bypassing on a lot of edge rushers potentially at 11, but I think we've all felt comfortable with the defensive tackle depth throughout this draft, and I do feel comfortable with the edge rushers that'll be available in the second round. So you could go corner in round one, and you could go with another position like defensive tackle or defensive end in round two if it made the most sense. So that's number one, Will Johnson. I would like to throw in there, there's always the chance he could go with Jahdae Barron, who just ran a 4.4, corner out of Texas, but I'm not putting focus on him. I just wanted to mention him. Now, a guy that they've met with, and this one probably caught a lot of people off guard, is Colston Loveland, tight end, Michigan. And this is my favorite tight end in the draft. I think he's one of the most talented guys. I watch a lot of Michigan football games because I have a family member that's a huge Michigan fan. So that means I get to watch a lot of Michigan games, and I've seen a lot of Colston Loveland, and I enjoy his game. He's got a lot of talent. He's a really good route runner and the ability to catch the ball. And I didn't think tight end was really a possibility. I know it had been floated. You had Matt Barrows, you had Matt Mayoko. They both did mock drafts, putting Tyler Warren with the San Francisco 49ers and letting him, that playmaker, be able to play for the 49ers. But the 49ers met with two tight ends so far, and I mean, they actually met with a lot, but I mean two at the top of the draft, and neither one of them were Tyler Warren. It was Colston Loveland, and it was Harold Fandon Jr. So even though the conversation has been Tyler Warren, and I think that's driven a lot by social media and some of the fan base, because Tyler Warren is a phenomenal player. I mean, he's fun to watch. He's a playmaker with the ball in his hands, and you could just think and envision about the things Kyle Shanahan could do with him. But I think some of what Colston Loveland does is a little bit of a difference from what Kyle Shanahan normally has. And one of the things that I've been talking about since last year was the 49ers' willingness or want to have a two tight end set in their 12 personnel that could actually win in the passing game. Right now, the 49ers run more out of 12 personnel than anything, but Mick Lombardi was with the New England Patriots, and he's our new quarterback coach, and he coached tight ends when they had Rob Gronkowski and they had Aaron Hernandez, and they were very successful with their 12 personnel. And we've seen Kyle Shanahan think about going to something like that with George Kittle and Jordan Reed. That was always the potential. Then when they got Charlie Warner, I think they were hoping that Charlie Warner could develop into a better pass catcher, and then George Kittle could be used in more of a receiving threat, but you had a dual threat in Charlie Warner, and that didn't work out. So we've seen the 49ers try to go different ways with that, right? Even with their draft picks, Cameron Latu, Braden Willis, hoping Latu could end up being that guy. Hasn't worked out. But Colson Loveland is on a different level than a guy like Cameron Latu. When you're looking at him, you're looking at a guy that can consistently win when going out there and running routes. He definitely can beat linebackers. He can beat safeties. He uses his body right. He's a hand catcher. There's a lot to like about Colson Loveland. But this would be a huge development for the 49ers going tight end in round one. I mean, think about where they take their tight ends normally. I mean, until Cameron Latu, the highest draft pick that they had for tight end was what? George Kittle in round 5. They took Charlie Warner in round 6. So Latu was, and I know Kyle Shanahan says those are 4th round picks, those comp picks. So he considers it a 4th, but still, you're talking that's where they get players. So this would be a huge difference. Now, Harold Fandon Jr. could sneak into the first round, but I could see the 49ers potentially interviewing him thinking he's a potential pick at 43. So those are some guys, but man, this is a huge development because if you did add Colson Loveland to your tight end room, it would make your team better. Now, is Colson Loveland going to come in and block like Charlie Warner? Absolutely. That's not his game. But what is his game is winning on the second level. What is his game is being able to beat safeties in the seam. What is his game is being able to make catches and win with run after the catch. So you know that you had such a big hole in your offense when you lost Charlie Warner. You just couldn't block well enough. So they went out and they got Eric Saubert. They wanted to see if he could do it. And he couldn't block on the level of Charlie Warner. He didn't have any upside when it came to catching the football. So the 49ers were missing out. So if you could get a guy like Colson Loveland, then maybe George Kittle could handle some of the Charlie Warner blocking type things, and Loveland could win a little bit when it comes to receiving. I'm not talking all the time, but I'm talking when you get into certain sets, when you're in 12 personnel. But then when you have both those guys on the field, you're really dangerous in 12 personnel. They put their base package out there, which is either a 3-4 or 4-3, and you have a potential to get a matchup of Colson Loveland on a linebacker, and I love that for the 49ers, or Colson Loveland on a safety, and I love that for the 49ers. So options would definitely open up. But would Kyle Shanahan be willing to draft a tight end this high? I think it would be risky, but the fact that they've met with him means they're doing their due diligence, and potentially it could make sense for the 49ers. And Colson Loveland is a phenomenal player. If they made the pick, it would be surprising, but in the grand scheme of things, I would understand it from an offensive perspective. But I can tell you, I feel like a lot of people would be very upset that the 49ers didn't go defensive tackle, especially if guys like Walter Nolan, and Kenneth Grant and guys like that are on the board. I think there would be a lot of frustration with Kyle Shanahan going tight end. But if you're thinking about his offense, it's a very nuanced pick, a guy that can change some things for them, that they could do some things. So to me, Colson Loveland does make sense. And of course, I mentioned Tyler Warren. He could always be a possibility too. Just because the 49ers meet with someone doesn't mean they're going to be the pick, or if they don't meet with someone that they're going to be the pick, because it just looks at positions and they're willing to consider tight end potentially as one of those spots. So that's interesting. Now, next up, this is one that is partly because of me, because I'm getting conviction about a player. And whenever I get a conviction about a player, it makes me think that they've got a chance to go somewhere where you don't expect it. And I think that the 49ers are definitely going to have a decision to make when it comes to linebacker. And they're trying to sign Drake Greenlaw before free agency, and that thing's going to get wrapped up well before we get to the draft. But when you're looking at linebacker, everyone's talking about Jalen Walker out of Georgia, right? The edge presence, but he can still play off-ball linebacker out of Georgia. I mean, this dude's, twitched up, freaked out, absolute stud. but I'm having conviction about Jihad Campbell. And I think that we've seen the 49ers be willing to take linebacker in round one before. And it wasn't a good idea at the time because we didn't know about Reuben Foster's relationships and what was going on with his off the field issues. But when you're talking about a player that can change the game, Jihad Campbell's one of those guys. I mean, nearly 6'3", 235 pounds, got a wingspan bigger than Fred Warner, and he can absolutely move. I mean, this is the closest thing to Fred Warner as far as athleticism and body type, that I've seen in a little while. But the reason that I like him is the way that he approaches the game and the way that he plays. He's a great stack linebacker. I think he's a better stack linebacker than Jalen Walker. I do believe Jalen Walker's a little bit better as an edge rusher. But John Campbell has upside as a pass rusher as well. In fact, he stayed at the combine and did some pass rush drills. So I think a lot of 3-4 teams will be interested in him too. But I think he's a guy that you could literally plug next to Fred Warner, for the next 4 years. And if you took him in the first round, you have him for 5 years. And he carries you through the Fred Warner days. Fred Warner's the Mike linebacker, but Jihad Campbell's right there with them the whole time. And then in 4 or 5 years, if Fred's ready to hang him up, you've got your next guy stepping in at Jihad Campbell. The dude is an absolute monster. I love him in the run game. It's good footwork. It's good vision. He does a really good job with his handwork. He sheds blocks well. He stacks and sheds, does a great job with that. He's got closing speed. He's also good in his drops. He reads and recognizes cover schemes and knows route concepts. To me, this dude is head and shoulders above every other linebacker when it comes to how he plays, stack linebacker, and the athleticism. The dude's a monster. And I think that a lot of people are starting to see Jihad Campbell as a first-round pick. And yes, it might be crazy to think about Jihad Campbell in the regards of pick 11. But when you're talking about a dude, and especially if, if Dre Greenlaw leaves, or even if Dre says, hey, we're going to do this one more year and then I'm out. Jihad Campbell, day one, I'm talking day one, could compete for your third linebacker job. And I think he would have a shot to win. And I do like D. Winters. I like him a lot. Jihad Campbell's different. There's just a difference here. This dude is a boomer. He hits you. He lights you up. He plays good coverage. To me, he's a dynamite pick. I think, if the Niners were picking 20 to 25, I would love this pick. But in the grand scheme, man, if you got to get your guy, Jihad Campbell could be that dude. I absolutely love him. And that potential, that's a little bit scary, to take a linebacker 11, that boomer bust, but I think this dude's going to be one of the great linebackers in the league. I honestly think he's going to be, on that level with some of the best linebackers, that we have in the game. And so that's why I'm becoming convicted. You watch the film, you see it, you've seen the workouts, and it matches the film. Everything's there. You go back and you watch the film, and it's just there. The drops, the coverage. He's a 3-down linebacker. The length, it's all there. And the dude's just getting better. And I think he could be a really good football player in this league. So he's one of my guys that right now I'm enjoying, and I hope he doesn't end up on any one of the 49ers rivals, because that would really be frustrating, because I do want to root for Jihad Campbell the whole time. I just think he's one of the special players in this draft. And if you want to have a special time, play Underdog Fantasy. You can sign up, use the promo code Niners, link in the description. Just download the app. Use the promo code Niners, get $1,000 in free bonus cash and a free pick, and then play the higher-lower game. They do basketball, NHL, lots of opportunities, lots of sports, and all you have to do is decide, do I think they're going to have higher or lower points? I think they're going to have higher or lower goals. And you go ahead, you make the pick, and you can possibly win with Underdog Fantasy's higher-lower game. Just make sure when you download the app using my link, please put in the promo code Niners. That'll help me out a lot. But play Underdog Fantasy today and have a good time. Now, back to the list. We just talked about Jihad Campbell. Is another guy that I've been saying I thought was going to end up being in the first round. And I think it's official now. I think there were people that were questioning his speed, potentially, if he could be a free safety in the NFL. And I've been saying consistently, this dude's a free safety in the NFL. He's got the ability to play the deep third. He's got the ability to play in the box. Dude's an absolute monster. And he is. Safety Nick Emenwari out of South Carolina. The physical gifts are through the roof. And I think that this dude is a ball hawk safety that can do it all. I think this is one of those types of guys that can make all the plays. And I get it. There was question marks about whether he could be an eraser type, right? If he could be that Earl Thomas, because that's the only way you're taking a safety this early in the draft, right? Malachi Starks, that's the other question mark. Do you take a safety this high in the draft? Well, if you think that you're going to have Earl Thomas, we've seen how that worked out for Seattle. And we've got two guys that were right there in the middle of the Legion of Boom leading the 49ers defense. Robert Saleh, Gus Bradley. Gus Bradley is partly the one that helped build that defense. He was the defensive coordinator for Pete Carroll when the Legion of Boom was going. So if they look at Nick Emenwari and see a player like I do, a guy that can cover the deep third, that can play that Earl Thomas type role over the top, but can come in the box when you need him to and be Cam Chancellor and light you up because he's 6'3", nearly 230 pounds, and runs a 4.3 40. Are you kidding me? This dude is a freak. And the thing is, it matches the film, and that's always what you want to find out. Is the physical traits going to confirm what you saw on film? I was sold on him as a first round guy before I ever even heard what his numbers were at the combine. I knew he was going to run fast. I knew he was going to jump through the roof. All it does is confirm it for everyone else, and now he skyrockets up the board. But at that size, 6'3", 220 pounds, running a 4.3, you've got to think that that's getting a lot of people's attention. But, I mean, it's not just that ability, even though, guys, this is going to a 43-inch vertical leap. Are you kidding me? A 1.49 10-yard split. A 1.38 broad jump. Are you kidding? Like, these are just through the roof. The dude tested, off the charts. But listen to his production last year. 4 interceptions. And he got return yards on all those. Really good. He had 2 pass defense. He had 88 tackles, 57 solo tackles. He's as big as a linebacker and covers like as good as some of the better safeties. To me, Nick Emenwari is a first-round pick, and he's a great tackler, fantastic tackler, and that's what the 49ers need. This is one of those guys. I think he could be one of those guys that could come in and make a huge difference for your football team. I mean, I love this guy. He has good recognition skills and coverage. He's able to play downhill with bad intentions. You want guys that can leave a mark when they hit you, like Talanoa Hufanga, like Malik Mustafa. Well, what if they're 6'3", 220 pounds? And, it comes down to how high do you take a player? And I think the 49ers, don't really normally value safety like that. And you would be paying him, a pretty good amount of money. But if you said, okay, we have to move on from Talanoa Hufanga, well, we're going to have our first choice of safety, and Nick Emenwari is that guy. You take him at pick 11 and you plug him. And like I said, it's a 4-year deal worth $20 million. Of course, you're going to end up close to $21 million. You're going to end up having, that 5th-year option as well. That is dirt cheap when you're talking about potentially signing one in free agency. So as long as you have that conviction, and I'm going to trust Robert Saleh, I'm going to trust Gus Bradley, I'm going to trust the scouts, but I think Nick Emenwari at 11 is not so crazy if you think he's going to be a game changer for your secondary. And I think he would be a game changer. And if you think he's going to be Earl Thomas, I can't say that. But if you think he's going to be, you got to make that pick. Earl Thomas was the top 15 pick. Dude was a crazy good player for years. So Nick Emenwari is going in the first round. Is he going as high as 11? I think someone would have to be as convicted about him as I am about Jihad Campbell. But, you're talking pick 18 to 20. I don't think that's too high anymore. He's sniffing top 20 because of the test scores, because now it matches what we saw on film. Nick Emenwari is an absolute monster. Now, a couple more guys that I want to talk about on the offensive side of the ball. And, I did bring up, I wanted to make sure I bring up Malachi Starks as a first-round guy as well, potentially. Now, he could fall in the second round. We'll see who falls in love with him. But let's talk about a couple of first-round guys on offense that could be out of the box. Tataroa McMillan. And, a lot of people are saying, you can't possibly draft a wide receiver in round one. You just took Ricky Pearsall. You have Brandon Ayuk. He was a first round pick too. But when you look at the state of the 49ers wide receiver room, Deebo Samuel likely to be traded. You look at Brandon Ayuk. He's dealing with an injury. John Lynch's comments didn't make me feel reassured that he was going to be ready until middle of the season at best. You do have good young players. Ricky Pearsall, great. Jacob Cowing, we'll see what he ends up being. Jawan Jennings, love it. But Jawan Jennings is also going into the last year of a 2-year deal. You're going to have to re-up with him. It's not a bad idea to invest in the wide receiver position. Now, is 11 too steep? Well, they better be a game changer, right? They better be Julio Jones. They better be Randy Moss. They better be, one of these guys, Larry Fitzgerald, that can make big-time plays for your team. Tedoroa McMillan's a freak of nature. I mean, this dude is 6'5", 210 pounds, and he can run. His body control is crazy. He's got hands. He had 84 catches last year for 1,319 yards and 8 touchdowns for the Arizona Wildcats. I mean, he's a dude. The guy's got the ability. I think he's a top 20 pick. Do the 49ers risk going McMillan at 11? I don't know. Kyle Shannon's looking for game changers, playmakers. Guy's a playmaker. He's a game changer. But we do know that rookies take a while, especially wide receivers, tight ends, to get used to the NFL game. How long would it take McMillan to be that guy? Well, you've got a potential out in the contract of Brandon Ayuk in the 2027 season. You probably have to be prepared for the wide receiver position to move in another direction at that time, financially, potentially. We'll see. I would love for Brandon Ayuk to come back and just be, one of those players, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities. Now, like I'm going to keep this, straight up. Some of these guys, like I said, are a little bit more far-fetched than others. And I think a wide receiver at 11 is a little bit more of a stretch than some of the other positions that we've talked about. But when you look at the elite talent, all it takes is Kyle Shanahan to fall in love with this guy because he can win around the line of scrimmage. He's got the ability to win vertically. He's got the length to be able to consistently, win contested catches. And he does have strong hands and wins that way. He's a good route runner. There's nothing that really hinders you from believing that he could be a good football player. So maybe Tedoroa McMillan at 11. Who knows? Maybe it wouldn't be him. Maybe it would be Luther Burden. I know a lot of people, this was last year. Luther Burden would have been able to came out. He would have been probably a top 10 pick. The way that he had all the contact balance, was able to break so many tackles. I think he's going to fall back a little bit now. I wouldn't even be shocked if Luther Burden doesn't fall into the second round. And so that could definitely change people's opinions. But you look at Tedoroa McMillan and, it's possible. Now, one last one. Highly unlikely. But I would be crazy if I didn't admit this. And I didn't say it. Is the 49ers have now met with 2 potential second-round running backs. Omarion Hampton and Caleb Johnson. And it's like I said before, it's not so much which running backs they meet with, but that they're meeting with a certain level of running back, right? So you get an idea. Colson Loveland, Harold Fannin. Okay, that's, first, second round. So maybe if Colson Loveland fell, they'd be willing to trade up. You get an idea of where they'd potentially target one of those guys. Fannin, right, pick 43. Omarion Hampton and Caleb Johnson could be there at 43. The 49ers might value running backs. We know this is a great running back draft early. But John Lynch just commented about Jordan Mason and potentially having to put a second-round tender on him. That would pay Jordan Mason close to $5 million. And he said it was interesting. Can we pay him $5 million? And I've been talking about the fact that I would probably trade Jordan Mason for a mid-round pick if I could get it. They've talked about Kyle Juszczyk and the fact that he's in the last year of his contract, so next year he'll be coming off the books. You have Christian McCaffrey, and he's the best running back in the NFL. But when Christian McCaffrey's not out there, you have to make sure you have a capable backup. I like Omarion Hampton. I like Caleb Johnson a lot. And eventually I'll get to the running backs. It wasn't high on my priority list. I've been working through defensive line, offensive line, and working through linebackers and so on. But what would stop the 49ers from saying, you know what? If we're going to pay $5 million a year for a running back, let's not pay Jordan Mason. Let's pay Ashton Genty, right? I mean, when you're thinking about it financially, we're going to make an investment. Yeah, it would be tough this year, but Jordan Mason goes out, Ashton Genty comes in. We know he's got way more upside. Next year, we do move on from Kyle Juszczyk. So now the running back room fiscally is still responsible, right? We still have Isaac Garendo under contract. You have another big back. And people will argue, well, you're not going to have that many carries for Ashton Genty. And you could be right. But there could be value there for Ashton Genty. Now, do I think this is an absolute long shot? Absolutely. Do I think it's realistic? Probably not. But I don't think it's so out of the box that you don't mention it when you're talking about the financials. People are willing to pay Jordan Mason $5 million for a season. Why wouldn't they be willing to pay Ashton Genty $5 million for a season? And I think he's a really good running back. I think there's a lot of talent. Like I said, Caleb Johnson, I love him. I love his balance. He actually reminds me of a running back that I used to coach. So in his running style. So I kind of lean towards him a little bit, full disclosure. But I wasn't going to talk about him. And then I thought, why not? Like, why not just bring it up that financially it's not crazy? It would be probably a gross misuse of a draft pick because Ashton Genty, even though phenomenal, would be playing behind Christian McCaffrey. But that 1-2 punch would be phenomenal. If you're planning on protecting Christian McCaffrey, not having him on the field as much and taking as many carries, then potentially Ashton Genty would make a lot of sense. You're going to pay Jordan Mason $5 million. Financially, it makes sense. I don't know if it makes sense to use pick 11 where you could get better at another position, because I do think that that's the best value, right? When you have a hole and you fill it with a player that's really good. But I just had to throw it out there. I want everyone to be clear. I don't think this is what's going to happen. And I would put it at a very low margin, 5%, maybe even less than that. But I'm just saying, when you're looking at it, it's not so crazy that you don't bring it up because we know how things go. So Will Johnson, Colson Loveland, Gia Campbell, who you guys know how I feel about him, Nick Emenwari, huge fan, Tedero McMillan. Could one of those guys be an out-of-the-box San Francisco 49er? Could it be Ashton Genty? Who knows? I think the other guys are more likely. I think the 49ers are probably more likely to go defensive tackle or edge rush in the beginning of the draft. I've been pretty apparent about that. But if the sales change, if you go a different way, you end up trading for a defensive tackle, you end up signing a defensive tackle, and all of a sudden you sign an edge and you're not looking to go that direction, you might look to add in another position. So some of these out-of-box guys might become more a reality for the San Francisco 49ers. So thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe. Please give it a 5-star rating. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.